Welcome. Let's jump right into this explainer. Today we're exploring the profound spiritual legacy of a modern-day preacher of righteousness, the very Reverend Hegumen Father Luke Sidarous. Through his life, his sermons, and his incredibly deep Orthodox Christian faith, Father Luke left behind what is essentially a masterclass, a real spiritual guidebook for living a holy life. We're going to unpack his extraordinary journey and really distill his saintly life lessons, his Christian faith insights, and a highly practical personal prayer guide that you can actually use.
So, to start us off, do you know Christ personally? Now, this isn't just some hypothetical question I'm throwing at you. This was a direct, pretty provocative challenge taken right out of Father Luke's own sermons. He constantly asked his followers this to drive home a really crucial point. Faith is all about an intimate relationship. It's not just checking off a list of rules. He wanted people to pause and really reflect on whether they were actually experiencing Christ in their daily modern lives. Right in the middle of all the eating, drinking, and everyday worldly struggles we all go through.
You see, Father Luke drew a very sharp line between worldly knowledge and spiritual knowledge. Worldly knowledge? Well, that's just the stuff we gather from books, external information, and human logic. It's great, but it's limited. But true spiritual knowledge? Father Luke taught that this is an actual experience of closeness, of pure intimacy and union with God. It stems from deep within. He pointed directly to the divine liturgy and the Eucharist as the ultimate way to receive this knowledge, uniting with Christ in a way that goes way, way beyond human reasoning. It's like a totally different wavelength.
So here is our roadmap for today. We'll be looking at 5 key areas. 1. Knowing Christ personally. 2. The roots of a holy life. 3. A guide to deep prayer. 4. Love and the heavenly kingdom. And 5. Friendship with the saints.
All right, let's dive into Section 1, Knowing Christ personally.
This is really the foundational pillar of his teachings. It's all about how we interact with the divine in our completely ordinary, mundane, day-to-day lives. Notice the focus on the name Emmanuel. That translates to God with us. And for Father Luke, this wasn't just some nice poetic expression. No, it was a literal, everyday reality. He taught that Christ shares in absolutely all aspects of our lives. He actually wrote that Christ is the one who blesses our meals, he blesses our sleep, and he's right there in our coming in and our going out. Father Luke even emphasized that Christ is with us during our dealings with the unholy or the secular world. The core takeaway here? God literally never leaves us for a single moment, not even for the blink of an eye.
Which brings us to Section 2, Roots of a Holy Life.
Before he was Father Luke, he was born Kamel Sidarous, way back in May 1940, in Upper Egypt. And he was raised in a remarkably pious family. His father was known around town as a wise, godly man, and his mother was deeply, deeply devoted to prayer and studying the Bible. But here's where it gets really interesting. A profound inspiration in his early life was actually his sister, Fozia. She tragically lost her sight at the age of 16, but rather than complaining, she continually thanked God for this heavy cross. And this revealed a really profound Christian faith insight to young Kamel, that physical blindness can actually lead to intense spiritual sight. According to the historical texts, God granted her these incredible gifts of spiritual insight, extremely powerful prayer, and even clairvoyance and visions of saints. Growing up in that kind of spiritually charged environment profoundly shaped him.
So how did this background propel him forward? Well, Kamel excelled academically. He actually became a lecturer in the Faculty of Engineering at the University of Alexandria, a really prestigious gig. But God had a totally different path in mind. It was at the university that he met and became a devoted disciple of Father Pishoy Kamel. Their souls became so deeply attached through their spiritual service together, and this ultimately led to a heavenly calling. On March 17, 1967, he was ordained into the priesthood by none other than Saint Kyrillos VI, and that marked the absolute beginning of his lifelong journey of pastoral care and spiritual teaching.
Moving right along to Section 3, A Guide to Deep Prayer.
Now, this is really the beating heart of his spiritual guidebook. If we break down Father Luke's personal prayer guide, it reveals a super fascinating perspective. Step 1. He taught his spiritual children that prayer isn't just about making worldly requests, like a cosmic vending machine. No, we must pray to enlighten the mind. So ask yourself, do you pray just to ask for stuff, or do you pray to enlighten your mind? He emphasized that when we neglect prayer, we aren't depriving God of anything. I mean, God doesn't need our prayers, right? Instead, we're depriving our own souls of wisdom, of spiritual virtues, and the actual power to resist evil. Step 2. You have to enter God's presence with your entire being, all your emotions, all your senses engaged. And Step 3. Maintain absolute reverence.
And Father Luke lived out exactly what he preached. During prayer, his face was characterized by this profound, almost heavy solemnity. Inside the sanctuary, his reverence was so intense that he literally never spoke a single word during prayer time. He wouldn't even sit down on a chair. He remained constantly attentive and intensely aware of the holy presence of God in that space. He was fully locked in.
Next up is Section 4, Love and the Heavenly Kingdom.
Let's explore how Father Luke's deep internal prayer life actually manifested in his daily actions and his immense love for other people. The classic imagery of Christ the Good Shepherd perfectly connects to how Father Luke operated in the real world. People who knew him described him as a real fisher of men. His own intense longing for heaven allowed him to capture misguided souls and gently redirect them toward the joy of the heavenly kingdom. When comforting the brokenhearted, he didn't just offer empty worldly platitudes. Instead, he directed their eyes upward toward heaven, reminding them that their names were written there, and that provided a deep peace that the world simply couldn't take away.
So, what kind of saintly life lessons can we actually apply to our own lives from this? First, he had this incredible, unique ability to speak the truth courageously, but he did it without ever abandoning his love for anyone. That is a rare balance. Second, he held absolutely no resentment. Zero. Not even toward those with completely conflicting opinions. Third, he constantly encouraged his followers to keep the commandments and strive against sin, even to the point of bloodshed, reminding them that the eternal reward is more than worth the temporal struggle. And ultimately, he taught them to abandon worthless earthly commodities to seek what he called the pearl of great price.
Father Luke once said something that really sticks with you. He said, "He who has truly seen heaven can easily forsake the world." Just let that sink in for a second. This single sentence perfectly encapsulates his core teaching, that we have to be willing to relinquish our worldly rights, deny ourselves, and patiently endure distress, all just to ensure that our eternity isn't lost.
There's actually a beautiful little anecdote that brings this quote right to life. A young lady once asked him, considering all the amazing places he had visited in his life, which beautiful country he would most like to live in. Father Luke answered immediately, without even a second of hesitation. He said, "I wish to live in heaven." It was just so obvious to everyone around him that his mind, his heart, and his senses already resided up there.
And that brings us to our final section, Section 5, Friendship with the Saints.
Here, Father Luke offered a really profound Christian faith insight regarding the saints. He taught that true devotion to the saints isn't just about knowing their historical stories or memorizing their miracles. The actual, concrete proof of our love for the saints is imitating them. It's about actively walking in their purity, taking on their spiritual struggles, and loving Christ exactly as fiercely as they loved him. It's about action.
And he certainly practiced what he preached. Father Luke cultivated incredibly intimate spiritual friendships with the Virgin St. Mary, St. George, and St. Mina. He was also deeply devoted and perfectly obedient to the contemporary spiritual giants of his own time, men like Father Mikhail Lebrime and his own mentor, Father Pishoy Kamel. He firmly believed the Church isn't subject to the changing, fleeting times of the modern age, so he heavily relied on the ancient Synaxarion, which is the compilation of the lives of the saints, to celebrate the spiritual victories of the early fathers every single day.
He had a saying, "It is humility that creates saints and raises them to the full stature of Christ." Now, the historical texts reveal that Father Luke was actually granted the very rare spiritual gift of discernment. He could literally perceive people's inner thoughts, their core personalities, and their hidden intentions. But he was incredibly cautious in hiding this secret gift. He never, ever used it for judgment, only to deliver people from evil snares and gently guide them to repentance. Despite having these immense supernatural gifts, he remained a humble, devoted disciple right up to the very end.
As we wrap up this explainer today, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought. We've seen how Father Luke Sidarous completely oriented his entire life, his teachings, and his deep, deep prayer toward the eternal. He lived as a sweet-smelling aroma of Christ. He lived with his heart already in heaven. So, where does yours reside today? Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into his remarkable spiritual guidebook, and I really hope it sparks a completely new way of looking at your own spiritual journey.